My name is Jill O'Donnell. I'm the director of the Yeutter Institute of International Trade and Finance here at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here today and everyone also who is tuning in via live stream to this fireside chat with the Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry for Canada. Minister Champagne, a special welcome to you and all of our visitors from Canada who are here today. A couple of quick acknowledgements before we dive in. I want to acknowledge our university's Chancellor, Rodney Bennett, who's here with us today.
Chancellor.
As well as Vice Chancellor for the Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources, Dr. Mike Boehm, who is here as well. Thank you for being with us. And I also want to thank the Association of the Students of the University of Nebraska, especially Tori and Summer and your leadership in co-sponsoring this event with us. We're really pleased.
Oh, wow. Thank you, guys.
And finally, I just want to note that our institute's namesake, Clayton Yeutter, was serving as the U.S. trade representative in the 1980s when the U.S. and Canada were negotiating their free trade agreement. And Clayton put that negotiation at the top of his list of top accomplishments in trade in his life. And it's in the book that you received, that top list is in there. So he ranked that very top, number one in terms of his accomplishments in the realm of trade. And we know how much that trade has grown and skyrocketed since that time. And I know we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So on that note, I want to introduce Minister Champagne. He was first elected to Parliament in 2015 in Canada and also previously served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, and Minister of International Trade, and has a lot of corporate experience as well, 20 years in Europe, done a lot of interesting things. So I'm thrilled to have you here. And again, welcome to Nebraska and to the university. We'll have a fireside chat for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a little time at the end for audience questions. So, sir, to start off, please tell us a little bit more about what keeps you busy as a Minister of Innovation, a little bit more about what you do there in this role.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for being all there. It's a real honor. I love the red color already. You know, it's like I want to buy my T-shirt, Chancellor, before I leave, just to make sure that I bring a bit of Nebraska with me. My first time in Lincoln, my first time in Nebraska. And by the way, I just want to say to all the students, you're very lucky to have Jill as your director because I must say I read, like most of your curriculum, and someone who served at NATO. And we can talk about that and what she did in her past. You know, when I was thinking about someone to lead an institute like that, I'm sure that the founder would be proud to have you. And big round of applause to you and the work you've been. You've been an amazing person, and I invite you. My briefing note was very detailed, so I feel I've known you for a number of years by now. But it's great to be with all of you, and certainly to be at Nebraska. You know, I studied in the U.S. as you mentioned. 20 years in Europe, people were asking, 5 in Italy, 10 in Switzerland, 5 in London. Then I'm a boy from rural Canada. So for me, I feel at home. I was just with the Chamber of Commerce. And this is the highlight of my day. Don't say that to the governor. I'm meeting him after. But this is really when I spend time with students, I feel, you know, not too many years ago, I felt I was there. And for me, hopefully what we do today can inspire to public office. I can tell you in the world we live now, there's no more time to find ways for people to get engaged. I think if there was a time in history where we need people like you to be interested in public service, I can tell you I've done private sector, I've done in public service, but you can change. You can really literally influence the world. I mean, Jill did and when in your days and certainly in my days, I mean, the world has changed a lot. I mean, if you look at I'm 53, I was, like you said, one of my first jobs was at Treasury, then the equivalent of USTR. And some of the difference, to start with the basics, in Canada, I'm elected official. So in Canada, to be part of cabinet, you have to win a district. Like if you were either a congressman, congresswoman, or senator. So you need to win a district, and then the prime minister is the leader of the party, which gets the most people elected in the House, and then select a few people to serve as cabinet. So for me, this has been the experience of a lifetime because I happen to have been Secretary of State during the last presidency of President Trump at the time. So Mike Pompeo was my colleague. I've seen a number of things happening in the world since then, how we are today compared to where we were. If you're asking me what's keeping me up at night, I mean, apart from my chief of staff, which is there, which always have me on speed dial, I would say seizing the moment. I mean, I think the world is in a place where there are big opportunities. You know, if you look at the world today, you say, what are the major thing that people think? You know, I was the Prime Minister of Japan, Chancellor of Germany recently, President of Korea. We had the Prime Minister of France recently. And I can tell you, there's three things which are top of mind and very relevant for Nebraska and very relevant for the Midwest and the United States. It's food security, energy security, and supply chain resiliency. You know, if you look at the world today, the world is going through a period where there's a lot of challenges. You're talking about inflation. You're talking about war in Europe. Something that I must say, in my days, I thought that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, I felt we were all on the same boat, on the same river. You know, trade was, the trade agreement we had provided peace, stability, and prosperity. And suddenly that is upended now. And I can tell you, I was just at the G7 meeting of Commerce Minister about 3 weeks ago in Italy. And I was with my German colleague, and I can tell you, when you live in Europe, your perspective about war is very different. He said, Minister, you and I could drive to the front line now. So I think that these things in the world are really shaping what we're living through. And in terms of the institution that you serve, for example, NATO, the World Trade Organization, I think we're in a redefinition of a number of these institutions that we built after the Second World War. So what keeps me awake at night is really to seize the moment. You know, I know physicists in the university, Chancellor, would disagree with me, but I feel that time has accelerated. It feels like that, at least, that things are just happening more quickly, and you have to react, you have to adapt, and you have to be seizing these opportunities that present. I'll give you an example. There's two megatrends if you look at the economy. You have the decarbonization of the economy, and you have the digitization of the economy. So AI, quantum, cyber, and all that. On the other end, decarbonization, I look, for example, at what has happened in different states, a good part in the Midwest, you know, this electrification, for example, of vehicle. These things only happen once in a generation. I feel like if you seize it at the right moment, you're going to be part of that new industrial revolution that we're living. And sometimes I feel like, you know, when people are saying, do you think it's really going to happen? I feel like the men in a buggy looking at Model T of Ford and saying, is that really going to work? Yes. And certainly, I think that for Nebraska, I was saying that, you know, Nebraska has the privilege to be centrally located, be able to address one of the key things, which I was thinking about food security. And Canada is your best partner. You know, Canada is the first export market for Nebraska. But I'll just tell you something that you probably don't know. But imagine, a lot of people would think China and Asia and all that, but Canada buys more from the United States than China, Japan, and France combined on a yearly basis. 35 states of the United States have Canada as their first export market. So basically, you're sitting next to your best customer. That's what I wanted to say, Jill.
Well, thank you for that. You talk about seizing the moment, and I'd like to ask kind of how you think, or if you see opportunities on the North American agenda or greater opportunity for more integration in the North American agenda beyond just commercially, like we have very strongly with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, to address some of these challenges. You know, there's pressure on institutions like you've talked about. We've certainly seen that at the World Trade Organization, a lot of pressure on that institute to operate so that it can meet the challenges of today. But how can the North American agenda be strengthened, do you think, to help seize the moment that we're in, to help tackle some of these challenges that you've identified? Well,
that's a very good question. I always say when I talk to my American friends, it's connecting the dots. You know, I feel that since we're neighbors, we're like the brother-in-law, sister-in-law. You don't call them for their birthday, but they're always there. It's kind of this relationship where we know we're next to each other. We're always going to be together. We've been together in pretty much everything. But there's really three aspects. One is around security. And you serve at NATO, and you would understand that. NORAD, and you have a major STRATCOM is here in Nebraska. Thinking first about continental defense, the North, the Arctic. I mean, one of the challenge, as you would probably appreciate coming from Nebraska, is how do we protect also the North and people who are looking, for example, at the Northwest Passage in our waters. So thinking about, for me, the defense infrastructure, making sure that we protect the North American airspace, but also the North American continent is certainly top of mind. The second one would be about resiliency. How do we make our supply chain more resilient? I can tell you from what I've seen, I think we're going from global supply chain to regional supply chain. You're going from pure efficiency to more resiliency. I think that people, I was with the CEO recently, he said, you know what I like about Canada? If things bad happen, I can truck stuff across the border. And worst comes to worst, I can put them in the back of my car. Because that's kind of the supply chain that you're looking. And I was the Secretary of State during the pandemic. And remember the famous PPE, the personal protective equipment. I mean, it was amazing. We say as G7 countries, we've invested billions. And yet, we were scrambling to find gowns and gloves and all that. And we kind of said never again. And at the time, we said, what do we need to be resilient? So we need to make sure we have semiconductors. We need to lead in battery technologies. We need to make sure that we have the critical minerals to make sure that we would be resilient in our economy. The third thing I would say, it's a growth agenda. I think that the world is looking, we have everything to attract the best. And I'll tell you, there's 5 things that usually attract investment. The first one is around talent. And talent is about you. Talent is about universities like the University of Nebraska. Talent is about the institute you're running. Because the United States and Canada are still big magnet for talent. I can tell you, I go anywhere in the world, and how many people have stopped me in the street. I'd like to become Canadian. I'd like to become American. I'd like to be part of the dream that we've been inspiring people for many decades and beyond, and centuries. The second thing I would say, the size of the North American market is very attractive. If you look at people who may want to look, this is still the biggest consumer market in the world. In a sense, Europe would say they're 500 million, but I would say there's depth in the ecosystem that we have built. The auto sector, aerospace sector, biomanufacturing, the ag sector. I mean, we're leading the world in many ways on technology. The third thing I would come back is the critical minerals. To build these semiconductors, to build these batteries, there's only one jurisdiction, or, say if you take North America as one, we have everything to do that. Of the 30-something critical minerals that the U.S. has identified, about 2/3 are in Canada, and all of them are in North America. So if you think about our resiliency, we certainly can do that. The fourth is energy, which is very, very key. Renewable energy is going to be key, and I think we are the largest energy supplier in the United States, but renewable energy, baseload renewable energy is going to make a difference. And fifth, I would just say access to market. Canada is the only country in the world which has access, who has a trade agreement, all the G7 countries. So whether you're looking at the Pacific with Japan or you're looking at Europe, I think we are ideally located in terms of geography to lead the world. And you know what? The best, I often say, our best natural resources are not underground, they're above ground. And they are in you. The people who are studying to make, the next technology available, to make sure, for example, that it's about time that we dream big. We need a vision for North America. For example, you're in Nebraska. How can we feed the world with plant protein? How can we use our resources? If you've looked at the world today, you see that scarcity of water is making an issue. If you look at climate change, there's a lot that you could be doing here in Nebraska, and we could do together to address some of the biggest challenges of humanity. And it starts with people like you in the room. And I would always encourage you, take the road less traveled. I look at you and I remember I was in your seats not too long ago. And I come from a small rural town in Canada. And nothing in my DNA would have suggested that one day I would be sitting with you, Jill, on this stage in Nebraska. But I took the road less traveled. And don't be confined by what you see today. Imagine the world as you want it to be. And not by what you're considering to live at a time and you're a generation that will see change that we have probably never seen before. I'll just give you an example. My daughters think I studied with the Flintstone when I said I didn't have a computer when I went to university. But I mean, listen, the world has changed at a pace that we would never have imagined. I mean, think about your iPhone has more computing power than when we landed on the moon. Just think about that. Now, Canada and the U.S. are going back to the moon. We're going to Mars together. I mean, we are pushing the boundary of science. If you look at, for example, hypersonic, if you're looking at technology like quantum, like AI, the world that you will live in is going to be very different than what you see today. And for me, just open your mind. to think, human brain are not good to think exponentially. We're good at thinking linear. But if you want to project yourself and how you're going to shape the world, just think exponentially. And certainly you're going to make a difference. And we need people in public office, by the way. I know that politics looks to be very divisive today, but it doesn't need to be like that. And we need more young women. We need more young people. We need your voice. Our Prime Minister always say, you're not the leader of tomorrow, you're the leader of today. Look at what's going on in the world today, and the young people are the ones, and the decisions we're taking today are going to have most impact on you. So your voice matters. The fact that you co-sponsor this event matters, because that means you want to be part of that, and that's why an institute like yours is crucial, and that's why I'm pleased to be with you.
Well, that's a great message, and Clayton Yeutter would have said very similar things, and he did, in fact, say very similar things when he was with us about telling students to think big and think about how much the world is changing and would continue to. So he really echoed his message there. You've mentioned Canada's free trade agreements. You have more than the U.S. does, and I want to ask you for your thoughts on a couple of those. The first one is the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which became the agreement that took effect after the U.S. pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership a year earlier in 2017. So you were trade minister when that was signed in 2018. And I want to ask what you think the impact of that agreement has been for Canada's economy as well as for diplomacy in the region.
That was big. By the way, one day I'll write a book, but I'll give you a free chapter. So because I was at the dinner that decided whether we were in Chile. And I'm going by memory now. My chief will lodge me if I'm getting wrong because I'm getting older. But we were at the dinner in Chile, and this was the day that the United States had decided to pull out, which was, to be honest, was a bit like a shock and a deception for most of us, because obviously having the United States and believing in a rule-based trading framework in Asia-Pacific is key to me. And thanks God we did it. But at that night, there was one evening where Canada is the second largest economy in the TPP after Japan. Now the United Kingdom joined. And I always joke with my UK friends. I said, where's your Pacific coast, by the way? I thought that you were an island in the Atlantic. They said, oh, we have the Pitcairn's Island in the Pacific. So we do have a Pacific coast in the Pitcairn's Island. So I always joke with them. But it's great to have our UK friends with that. But at the time, Canada was the second largest economy. And I sat with the Minister of Japan. I can't remember who was, because they've changed since then. And I said to him, I said, listen, we have two choices. Either we enjoyed the dinner and it was a lovely place and all that, and we all go home and we say, this is a missed opportunity, or we roll up our sleeve and say, the U.S. has left, but let's make it happen. The world needs that, because what's going to be the alternative? If we don't have a rule-based framework in Asia-Pacific, China is going to dominate the trading agenda in the region, and therefore we roll up our sleeve and made it happen. And I think today, if you fast forward, this was a very wise decision. I'm happy that dinner concluded on that note as opposed to the other one, because now we have a framework. And just why does that matter? I was with the leadership of Japan recently. I think the Prime Minister might have been there. I'll just give you an example. Japan, which is an island, 125 million thereabout, they import about 60% of their food, 80% of their fuel, and their neighbors is North Korea, China, and Russia. So if you go there, you can understand that the United States and Canada are the best strategic partner they can dream of. Because when you are in that situation, economic security is national security. Food security is national security. And when you are in that environment, that's why I'm so hopeful and why this was so consequential is that whether you're in South Korea or in Japan, these trading relationships are essential for their own security. And the same thing, if you're in South Korea, I was with my colleagues recently, I said, Minister, for us, national security is almost like a weekly thing. North Korea is sending missiles about every week in the sea. They have, they have National Security Council almost every week to deal with that. So their perception of the challenge of the threat and security is far more present than we live, obviously, in North America. So for me, the best way to ensure stability, prosperity, and security is having these trade agreements, and that's why I think they're so fundamental. And let me say, because of the state of the world today, I don't think we will be able to have many more, at least for a period of time, because in humanity, you always have to put yourself in perspective. I'm reading a book, by the way, that you would love. It's called Same as Ever. And they're quoting one of the most famous person from Omaha, because this is about the things that never change. And obviously, they're asking Warren Buffett, what do you think is going to be the best stock in 10 years? He said, you know what? He said, I don't know, but I'll tell you something. In 1963, the most sold candy bar in the world was the Snicker. In 2023, the most sold candy bar in the world was the Snicker. So he said, you know, there's things that don't change. And those, you have to look at these trends to decide what is the underlying principle that you're going to do. So for me, trade is always going to be there, but you need to make sure that we have frameworks like, I would say, the TPP. And the CP was my fault, by the way. If you want to blame someone,
your fault?
I'm the one who, I know it's a mouthful to pronounce, but I'm the one who insisted that we had comprehensive and progressive. And so I am the one who created that. So for all of you who have to learn to pronounce CPTPP, the CP part is the guy in front of you.
So I've been tripping over that for years.
I know.
Now I know who to blame.
You could put my name on it because I insisted on the amendments, and the colleagues around the table thought it was a mouthful. But we thought at the time that the concept of comprehensive and progressive, to say that, you know, this was one of the trade agreements that went beyond tariffs, and we thought it was important to inspire others. But yes, I am responsible for that.
Okay. I learned something very new today. A lot of
Yes.
things, but that's interesting. Okay. Well, speaking of trade agreements, again, I want to ask you about another one, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreements, of course. People are already starting to talk about the 6-year review that is coming in 2026. And I'm also starting to hear people say that Chinese investment in Mexico may be very important on that agenda. I'm wondering what you think are going to be the top items as we get closer to that formal review, and if that is one item that you think is going to be important.
Well, NAFTA, as it's called, and the founder of the Institute was, you know, we've been trading for 150 years. So when people were asking me, I used to be, at the time, Minister of Foreign Affairs, is that going to work? I said, listen, we've been trading for 150 years. Obviously, we're going to find a way to agree at what should be the framework. I think this is one of the most consequential agreements in the world. I mean, if you look at North America and what we have done between Canada, just Canada and the United States, think about that. The trade between our two countries is $3.6 billion a day. It's north of $1 trillion per year. I mean, this is the most progressive, the most beneficial economic zone. And I always say a decision on one side of the border will have an impact on both, because there's no nation which have more integrated supply chain. If there's only one thing you remember from today, just remember Canada buys more from the US than China, Japan, and France combined. So just, you know, in the scheme of things, that gives you the magnitude of what you see. And Nebraska is a good example where our Consul General was saying, you know, we send phosphate, we send a number of nutrients, we send livestock back, you process the meat. I mean, we are integrated in a way that is probably unseen in many parts of the world. I think that we have to preserve everything that we have achieved. And for me, I'm always trying to say, let's try not to fix what's not broken. You know, this is working fine. We have been trading with each other for decades. And honestly, if you think about the millions of jobs that depend, for me, it's more about a North American agenda. To your point, I mean, we have to be engaging with China with eyes wide open. I am one of those I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs when China illegally detained 2 of our Canadians for more than 1,000 days. And certainly, I think when you're looking at strategic supply chain, we would be well advised to make sure that we have this supply chain well organized between Canada and the United States. And certainly, this review, in my view, will not be at the forefront of the agenda, because there might be tweaks that people are looking at. But if you look at the big picture, this is an agreement that is securing millions of jobs on both sides of the border. And honestly, especially when you're in Nebraska and you think that, you know, your best market is Canada, and the exchange that we have, you know, balanced trade and all that, if there's an example of that, is really Canada and certainly Nebraska and the United States.
So you mentioned, we talked about China here a little bit. I want to ask you kind of about this idea of a second China shock that some economists are starting to talk about. With the first China shock, of course, referring to China's entry into the WTO in 2001 and booming exports after that. those exports out of China are surging again, and manufacturing surplus is up there as well out of China. So I'm wondering if the first China shock had as much resonance in Canada as it did here because of its linkage to domestic manufacturing job losses, and if you see the same level of maybe concern or just watchfulness of that in Canada?
Well, I'm a big believer in manufacturing. I certainly believe that, when historians look back, when we outsource all that manufacturing, I mean, we'll have to look obviously, like you said, the first shock was felt, and now we feel the consequences. And for me, I always say manufacturing plus innovation equal prosperity. And when people try to challenge me, I say, look at Taiwan. Taiwan did not become the major producer of semiconductor by accident. They invested for about 40 years. Look at what happened in South Korea. South Korea did not become a manufacturing powerhouse by accident. The state made sure that after the war in Korea, they would invest in that. The same thing in Japan, same thing in Germany. So I'm a big believer, the whole IRA and CHIPS Act is about reshoring, friendshoring, bringing things home. And I think we would be well served with that. I think that we need to continue to invest to manufacture, goods and equipment in North America, and making sure that the innovation would happen here. I think that 3 decades where we had outsourced manufacturing, that was at a time where I think people were focusing a lot on pure efficiency and were forgetting resiliency. And when you look at the state of the world and the geopolitical issues you have and what you're going to need to succeed in the economy of the 21st century, I think that having that on our shore and integrated between Canada and the United States, I think it's the best way to succeed in the 21st century. Because, it's not only manufacturing today. You have to think it's about manufacturing plus all the digital technologies that are going to come, AI, quantum, cyber. A car of the future is basically a computer on wheel. You'll walk into this most likely autonomous vehicle. It's going to become your bubble for a few minutes. So the car is going to be really like an electric motor on wheels, but then you're going to be connected. How do you protect that? How you protect the information? How you lead in 5G and 6G technology? I was just in Washington over the weekend, and we were looking with some think tank with unclassified thing, but where do we need to lead? And the good thing, I think, is that when you talk about advanced manufacturing, when you think about semiconductors, when you think about quantum, AI, hypersonic, we are in the space where we're going to have the tools to succeed. And one of those that I'm very mindful when I'm in Nebraska is all around food. For me, food and energy security are going to be key in the 21st century. You just look, some of you may have looked what happened in Dubai recently with the floods. I don't know if you've seen the image, but you Googled that. The highways in Dubai are like rivers now. And I'll tell you something, I'm sure you would not mind, but I was texting my good friend, the foreign minister of the United Arab Emirates, and I said, I feel sorry, I'm seeing the image in Dubai, and he just texted me back, he said, climate change, nothing more. And so I think that in a world like that is going to be challenged, we can play a big role, and I think that's why I'm so hopeful when I'm here, that, for example, plant-based protein, how can we feed the world, and how can we have the ambition to do that together with new technology?
Can you follow up on that just a little bit more about where you might see the potential for cooperation or collaboration with Nebraska or with the United States as a whole to achieve these visions you have for food security and energy security?
Well, I think I see a lot. For me, I've been 10 years, you travel the world, and you realize that, when you come back home in North America, you have everything. With the economy of the 21st century, the world is about talent of the 21st century. The world is about resources. The world is about access to market. The world is about critical mineral. And if you look, I was lucky when I studied in the Midwest. I went to Case Western. I know, Chancellor, sorry, I didn't come to Nebraska. I apologize. When I was doing my JD, there was poster, and there was only one U.S. university that year. I'm sure now you do far better. You must be in all campuses in red and making sure students can choose. But I had the privilege to have a teacher which was called, you may remember, Henry King Jr. He was the youngest U.S. Army prosecutor at the Nuremberg Tribunal. He's the one who prosecuted Albert Speer. And he created the Canada-U.S. Law Institute. And he always reminded us that there's three things you need in order to attract investment and success: stability, predictability, and the rule of law. And he taught me that. I was 20, and still today I remember. And I think in a world which has a lot of turbulence and challenges, what we offer the world is that kind of stability, predictability, and the rule of law, and the fact that, you know, we have the talent, we have the energy, we have the critical minerals and the natural resources to power the world. I think we can frame an agenda for success, and certainly, I say let's seize the moment. I think the world is in need and demand leadership from North America. I think we inspire the world. I can tell you, I go to G7 meetings, and a lot of my colleagues say, Minister, we would trade our problems with yours tomorrow, you know. They see us as leading. I think that we have to be ambitious. This has always been a nation, and in Nebraska, and I look at Canada, people who have been ambitious, you know. I think we need to raise the level of ambition, and I think that together, by framing a plan for North America of growth, thinking about how we can produce energy. I think about nuclear energy, for example, small modular reactor. Think about how we're going to lead in the digital economy of tomorrow, how we can lead in manufacturing. How can we make sure, for example, we're talking about technology when you're talking about feeding the world. There are technologies now that we can deploy. And I think the world, honestly, when you have a U.S. flag on a product or a Canadian flag, it stands for quality. It stands for excellence. It stands for traceability, reliability. And in a world like that, I think that we have everything to succeed. To be honest, first, by being a magnet for people is the best. You know, demography is destiny. And if we can attract and train the best people in the world, like the people I see in front of me, this is what's going to make the difference in the world, because the magnet that we are for talent is really, for me, the best ingredient for success in the 21st century. And I think when I look at the world and what the world needs, we can lead in the electric vehicle revolution. We can lead in feeding the world. We can lead in the new technology that will bring, for example, in the aviation industry. We can lead in quantum and AI that are going to be part of our daily lives one way or the other. And that's why I have never been as hopeful as that. In a world which is very challenging, I think first and foremost, we need to make sure that within North America, we secure a supply chain, we work together, and understand that our prosperity is linked. You know, one thing that will happen in one country will have an impact on both. And that's my job, is to connect the dots to make sure that people understand that you know, we're not only commercial trading partner, but we're best friend and allies, and certainly that's what makes me hopeful. And especially when I see the students, you know, because you're the one who are going to have to take it from us and make sure that you frame that in a way that would suit you. And I can tell you, the world wants to hear your voice. The world wants to hear your voice. The world wants to be inspired. The world wants to see that you're going to shape that you believe in institution, that you believe in the dignity of people, that you're going to inspire the rest of the world in that journey. And I would say, for those who think that this is a difficult time in the world, you can change things. And it's upon you that these changes are going to be changing, and you're going to shape the world the way you want.
So one more question before we open it up to any audience questions. You sound like an optimist. You sound hopeful, and like you see a lot of possibility for what North American leadership and integration can achieve. And I wanted to ask you, what obstacles do you see to that? Or what practically is it going to take to get to this level of leadership you'd like to see emanating from
Pessimism? I think that, but honestly, there is no nation that could be more optimistic than its leaders. You know, look in the history, you know, how if we're not optimistic, who's going to be? I think you have to travel the world to see that, there's obviously a number of things to fix. But if you look at the state of the world, we have every reason to be optimistic. But I think what could be preventing, or I'd say somehow detracting from that, I would say we need to keep investing in our institutions. I think institutions have been there for a long time, and they have ensured that over time there's different waves, in the history of mankind, where you go. But institutions have been, outliving us, all of us, and they will. So making sure that you maintain these institutions, you make reform and modernize them. The other thing I would say is that not forgetting that we live in a connected world. So what happens in some places in the world will have an impact on us. I'll just look, some people may say, well, there's war in Europe. How does that touch me? Well, I can tell you what you're paying more for food today has everything to do about the war in Ukraine. What you see in Ukraine has everything to do about the fact that you've seen inflation. I remember when I was at the beginning of the war with my colleagues in Europe, and they were saying, for example, the fact that Germany had imported gas from Russia for, well, the good part of 30 years at a very good price. The fact that this has stopped, and this is Germany is kind of the economic powerhouse in Europe in terms of machinery and equipment. Well, this has created inflation. See today. This was predictable. A lot of what's happening is predictable. So I would say world events can have an impact on that. And making sure that people understand that in this disconnected world, we all have a role to play. That you cannot insulate yourself. Climate change is another one. You cannot insulate yourself from that. So we all have to be in this together and making sure that we understand what's coming, but also believing in the power of people to shape things. Because I always remember, I think about one young person that always amazed me, Greta Thunberg. How can you imagine that one person can have a voice like that in the world today? That was not possible during my days. But today with social media, each and every one of you can change the world. One person can have a lot of influence in shaping the minds of people. And I would say always, have big ambitions and never be constrained by what you see today. I remember when I was young, I live in a town where the river used to be used as there was a logging company. And instead of trucking that for a century, they used the river. And the plant was just next to where I lived. And when I was young, I was looking at the river, and people, I remember with my dad, we wanted to go like fishing, but it was impossible. You could almost walk on the logs in the summer. And if you had asked me that one day I could do that, I would have said that's impossible. Now, 20 years ago, the state decided that there would be no more of logs or the river being used for logging, in the sense that it would be back to the people. And now today, this is one of the largest boating channel that you can find in my state. And I look at the same window that I used when I was a kid, and I say, if you'd asked me 30 years ago, could I ever use a boat and swim? I would have said, you out of your mind. For 100 years, no one did that. And now today, there's hundreds of thousands of people who are coming there to enjoy the view, the scenery, and the river. And it just always impressed in my mind that we should never imagine the future by being constrained by what we see. And you have all the powers to do that. And today with social media, with everything that's coming, your generation, at a time like that in the world, which is craving for leadership, craving for people which have decency, craving for people who will bring dignity, craving for people who are going to bring new ideas and leadership, I think a university like Nebraska and what you're doing, Jill, this is what we need to repeat in many places and make sure that the young people believe that you may think that things are not perfect today, but the power you have to change them is immense, and all of us will be relying on you.
That's a great message for the students in the room, and I see a lot of you. We have a little time for some audience questions, and Cheyenne has a mic, if you could just wait for that. Okay.
And don't be shy, you can ask me about anything. Trust me. And this is broadcast, so before you tweet what I said, let me know. I may get in trouble with the media after, but sir.
Hi, well, thank you. I enjoyed this. It was very informative. And I was first wondering, kind of based on that most recent point, the idea of technology and innovation has almost been politicized and feared throughout the United States. Both kind of, you think AI and blockchain more in that resiliency. You can think, like you were talking, plant-based protein, and we had a national leader infer that renewable energy could cause a major illness. How kind of, one, is that differ from your home? And then also, how can, as students and young people, bring that change in the future, kind of to bring that to our country?
Well, I would say we need to get back to basics. That's why universities have a big place, I think. You know, when we came in office, we put science back as the key pillar of our decision. You know, as elected official, you're not necessarily a subject matter expert in everything. I had 5 departments. I'm a lawyer by training, so I may not know everything. And in our system, you're not supposed necessarily to be. It's good if you are, but one thing that we should not forget is when you take science-based decision, you know, which is grounded in facts and in science and rigor. I think this is the thing that we need and bring back to the floor. A lot of people today confuse opinion with facts. And in the world of AI, I would say it's even more. I mean, I've just seen as I was flying, because yesterday was thunderstorm in Chicago, so we ended up deplaning at 1:30 and having to find a hotel and make our way to Lincoln this morning. And one thing that I've seen, which was shocking to me, but you're smarter than me, so you may have already seen that, is that there's a company now, believe it or not, Jill, that is doing newscast completely from AI. So you watch that, and it's like if you were watching, like in my days, was Tom Brokaw, I think at ABC, or whatever you want, which network, and it's a full newscast of 15 minutes with, you know, what appears to be a human being, but it's all AI generated. The person who is interviewing, it's all AI generated. They use news, and then I guess they put that in a model, and it comes back with a newscast, with interviews of, and I was saying, wow. So for me, that's why I've been a big advocate to say, you know, in order to move from fear to opportunity, we need rules. We'll need to have watermark. We'll need to make sure that, to your point, you know, the biggest challenge, I think, with these new technology, and when I was at the G7, we're talking about that. Believe it or not, this year, 2024, there's going to be about 50 elections touching 4 billion people on the planet. A lot of people were concerned about what AI can do. People think about dual use. You know, you could train someone to build a bomb or something. But the biggest danger, I think, is deep fake. Is that today you can use my voice. I mean, actually, my wife is freaking out that I'm using face. Well, I should not say that in line, but anyway, I use face recognition for my bank account. You know, in a sense, because I'm not very good with codes, because there's so many codes and I forget all of them. Government likes to change them every week, so it's remember your codes. But someone was saying, you say, Minister, you're the easiest person to because your face is very public, so we can use your face and your voice. And so much that when I was at the G7 meeting, the person who was presenting, believe it or not, took the voice of one of the participants, I won't tell you who it was, and created a fake interview within seconds. Just because they had heard the voice during the meeting, unbeknown to us, but that was a presentation, was kind of organized. They used the voice of one of my colleagues, and in a matter of seconds, they created like something you would say which would be outrageous. And everyone looked at each other and say, how, you know, so in my view, to your point, I think we need to go back to make sure that science and rigor and also having a lot of safeguards to these things, because the moment that you confuse facts and opinion, I think that is a very dangerous thing, and you need to make sure that you have science-based and evidence to make your decision in government. That is the best way to ensure that you make the best possible decision, and that's certainly what we do, and I think that today rigor is key, because the decisions we have to take are very consequential for people.
Thank you for visiting us. So my name is Niaz. I'm from Hamilton, Ontario.
Oh, you're Canadian?
Yes, I
So I work for you then. I'm your employee.
No.
So thank you for paying my trip today, or part of it at least. Not all of it, trust me, not all of it, part of it.
I'm a grad student in the chemical and biomolecular engineering. So I have a question regarding the electric vehicle. So as you're mentioning in your interview that this is a key for the environmental sustainability, but however, we also know that to maintain the sustainability, we need a lot of supply of rare earth materials. And most of the rare earth materials are in Africa and China these days. And what challenge do you see in the rapidly changing world order to secure those supply chain between those countries and US and Canada? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to see, Chancellor, I'm happy that there are Canadians in University of Nebraska. Any other Canadians? 2, great. So you're not the only one paying for my trip, at least. There are 2 of you. It's great to, It's great to be with you and great that we can do that. I think that just to correct your statement there, North America has all the critical minerals in order to build the battery, but not only the batteries, the semiconductors. I think that if you look at what the world needs in terms of its resilience in the 21st century, semiconductor is the DNA of progress. I mean, honestly, without semiconductors, I don't think we could not do that interview with a microphone at least, and I'm not sure the lights would work or a lot of things around us that we take for granted. And that's part of my discussion with the United States about resiliency. We are blessed because between Canada and the United States, we have all the critical minerals to do batteries, to do semiconductors, and to do most of the things that you would need in the 21st century. And I must say, this is of critical importance in how you shape the future. And having people like you are studying that and hopefully going to do research on that, I would say you have a lot, and that's the point that Jill was making before. We have let other countries to take a lead on us for decades. I think about China, for example, with batteries. Now, I would say we have repatriated a lot of that in North America. And for me, I say, you know, it's just the smart thing to do. I don't think people want just to buy the vehicle, they'd rather make them. And for me, as part of this decarbonization and this evolution of industrialization, we need to be at the forefront of that. This is about millions of jobs in our country, and we have everything to do that. And you've seen now Japanese firms, Korean firms. I mean, Canada, you may have seen just last week, Honda decided to make its largest investment in Honda's history, $15 billion. We've seen the same thing in Ohio. We've seen the same thing in Oklahoma, in many states. And I know in Nebraska, the governor is looking at different things. And I think that this is telling that the world, I'll tell you the three countries in the world which have received the most foreign direct investment last year. The first was the United States of America. The second one was Brazil. And the third one was Canada. And it just tells you, people vote with their feet. You voted with your feet. You chose the University of Nebraska. Investor votes with their dollar. They chose the United States and Canada. We're in the top three. So when you take these markers, you say, well, the world must be seeing something in us. Because if you're an investor, you can put your money elsewhere. You can put it in any country you want. But the fact that they say, why? Because we have the best worker in the world. We have some of the best research universities. We are at the forefront of the new technologies. We have the critical minerals. We have access to market. We have everything that I would say the world in the 21st century needs. And first and foremost, we have people like you and your colleague in the room who are going to be able to bring us to this next level. Because now that all is there, and I know the world may seem challenging from now, but if you read history, you will see that you always have periods like that. I think now we might be at a high intensity in terms of challenges in the world. But usually then, if you look at the history of the world, we'll find a new momentum. And I think in this new momentum, that's going to be your momentum. When I finished university, believe it or not, we had a lack of opportunities. Today, we have a lack of people, which is very, just in 20, 30 years, I don't know when you finished, but when I finished, you needed, at bar school, you needed to find, to do your articling. And we were all scrambling. And honestly, it was really tough. My daughter just did the first year in law school, first year, and she got a job this summer. I did 3 years, and I would have dreamed to have a job after 3 years. And she got already a job in the first year. That just say how the paradigm has shifted now that, you're the premium. That's what people want, is smart people like you. And the fact that you chose to come here in Nebraska, the University of Nebraska, is a testament to... how did you pick Nebraska, by the way? Now my research interest matches the department. Okay. I'm on the systems biology research, and my professor is one of the top professors. Wow. You see, Chancellor?
I think we have time for one more brief question before the minister has to get to his next
we
engagement.
can take two. I'll go quickly. We've been late for 10 years.
I'm told one.
They're used to that.
So my name is Katie, and I'm from Abbotsford, British Columbia. So,
you're from BC. Lucky you.
So my French is dismal. So I've been in the U.S. for the past 9 years doing education in the field of engineering also. And my question relates to something that I think is affecting both Canada and the state of Nebraska, and it's kind of connects to that innovation and talent you brought up. So during my time here, I've heard kind of the idea of brain drain. So we're losing some of this talent. And I guess in our case, we came to Nebraska instead of doing education in Canada. But looking at the future as we graduate and looking at opportunities, some of the opportunities that we have actually pay more here in the U.S. than Canada, or there's just like more opportunities. So I guess my biggest question is, and being optimistic, what are things that would drive people to come to Canada or to stay in Nebraska, since both of these places sometimes struggle with this?
Opportunities. And the fact that you came to Nebraska, I see that, a positive. We need people to go both sides. I'll tell you a story. You'll love this one. And you can post this one. It's a true one. So when I applied to do my master in the United States, I was more involved in student politics like you. So my grades were average. I'm not saying that you should not follow my example. By the way, you should all strive to have A's everywhere. So I sent my application to the university. And 3 weeks after, they sent me a letter. They said, "You're accepted." I was so incredulous that I called them. I said, "Are you sure? Have you really looked at?" They said, "Hey, we don't joke. If you get the letter, you better show up on that date." And so I did my master in law, in U.S. law. And after I graduated, it's a true story, Chad. So I see the dean. I said, "Can I ask you," now that I put my diploma, I secured it in a vault and no one could remove it from me. I said, "Can you tell me why would you ever accept someone like me? Honestly?" He said, "Do you want the truth?" I said, "Well, sure, now I have the diploma." He said, "It may hurt a bit." He said, "Don't worry." He said, "This was the first year we opened the program to international students, and you were the only Canadian to apply." So it showed me in life sometimes better be lucky than otherwise. But the fact that you came here, I see that as positive. We need students to come from Canada to Nebraska and vice versa, because when I go and in my department, I have the Research Institute. I go from space to industry. I have all of that. But when I see students from around the world, it gives me hope, because the best way to progress in research and science is to have this exchange. And between Canada and the United States, we should favor that. We should always favor that. I mean, I was lucky. I got admitted. And honestly, the fact that I studied in the U.S. has been the, kind of the rocket that boosted my career to be. And I see a lot of Americans in Canadian colleges and universities that said, we want to be part of that. So there's no competition between us. We're in this together. We're going to lead the world in these new technology and in research and science. And the fact that we have, people who exchange ID, the fact that we're together and you have the chance to have, this has been, I still have friends from my days in law school in the United States to this day, and we still keep in touch. So for me, this is a net benefit. The worst would be just to not open your mind to the world. You live in the world, and we live in a world which is interconnected. So the more you have a chance to be exposed to different countries, different language, different culture, is a real positive. So for me, I see that positive, and I hope one day you're going to come back. But the weather in BC is pretty tough to beat, so one day I'm sure you're going to come back. Sir, you had a question. No, I think so, yes. Yeah, we have time. I look at their face, they're not. No, we have time for two. I tell you, we're okay.
So I had a question about the world. As you said, the world's moving faster and faster. It feels like there's a new, groundbreaking discovery every month at least. How do you keep track of all that and figure out, okay, what do we need to focus on? And then how do you focus on it? What's the process of saying, oh, we want to look in this industry, we want to look in this area. How do we help the people in that area?
So I have good news and bad news for you. So good news, you're going to graduate and you're going to get a great diploma from the University of Nebraska. The bad news is that you have to learn all your life. And I don't know if it's a bad news. I think it's a good news because, today if you want to keep up, it's not like you studied for 15 years or 20 years and then you stop. You have to be a long life learner. Why? Because things change very rapidly. To be honest, I'm 53, and if you had, artificial intelligence, even before ChatGPT, which is a very recent thing, this is like 18 months. I mean, I challenge, if we're to do a survey, you and I go to the street and ask 18 months ago, what is ChatGPT to people? I guess like 99% of the people would say, I have no clue what it is. And still today, I think you probably have 50% of people don't really know. So my point is that the good thing is that with what you've done here, you have the foundational knowledge. And this is important. For me, I always call that the pyramid of success. For me, I always say you need basic knowledge. In my case, you need ambition, and a lot of luck. This has been my pyramid, at least if I look at myself. You know, I had I gained the knowledge I needed. I had ambition, and then I had a lot of luck, because life, there's also an element of being at the right place at the right time. But for you and for us, to be honest, I see the transformation. I'll give you an example, the electric vehicle. When I was appointed Minister of Industry, Commerce Secretary, that was about 2 years ago, one of the first briefings I received by my officials was the end of the auto sector in Canada. They said, Minister, it's a great news we have for you. You're going to be presiding over the end of one of the largest industrial sectors in the country. Think about that as your first day in the office. It's really a shocker, you know. He said, but I said, that cannot be. I said, we are going to be at the forefront of the revolution. Why would we lose that industry? If we turn around, we can. And so for me, to your point, you always have to look at these opportunities. With every challenge comes an opportunity. Depends how you look at it. And it's true, people say I'm an optimist, but I'll give you an example. When I called Volkswagen in Germany, believe it or not, my chief would nod, this was a cold call. And I landed the largest gigafactory of Volkswagen outside of Germany. I saw an article. I'll give you the full story. I saw an article in the Financial Times. They were saying, Volkswagen, which is a German automaker, about 2 million cars per year, wanting to look at electric vehicle in North America. I said, well, that's interesting. So I said, can I talk to the CEO of the company? And the partner said, oh, we don't know. We never dealt with them. Well, I said, well, if we only talk to people we know, how are we going to get new customers? They said, well, we don't. So I figured out the number to someone. I called the U.S. CEO. I said, hi, my name is François-Philippe. He said, great. And his name is it Greg? I'm trying to remember the North American CEO. He said, it's great. I said, I read this article. You want to do this electric car? Listen, we're very interested. I said, have you ever had a board meeting in Canada? Oh, he said, no. I said, maybe that'd be something. You know, you sell a lot of cars. We should. He said, you know, that's a good point. Why don't we do that? So 3 months after, we get a call. And, you know, when you're minister, just like I know a lot about Jill, they give you these big briefing books. So I have this picture of everyone and bios. It's a true story. I'm walking in the street of Toronto, which is a fairly big city, a bit bigger than Lincoln. And I'm walking, and I say, this is Yeutter Institute. And my team looks at me and said, who's that guy? But I say, he's the chief procurement officer of Volkswagen. They said, wouldn't you know that? Well, I said, you put that in my briefing book, for God's sake. I read the stuff you give me. So I go to see him. I say, hi. He's freezing. I said, you must be Yeutter Institute. He said, yes. He said, who are you? He thinks I'm like police or something. I said, I'm the minister you're going to meet in half an hour. I said, welcome to Canada. Believe it or not, that story became the story at the board meeting, that Canadians are so welcoming, and now they think they recognize people in the street, to say they're so welcoming. They even saw us in the street and welcome us. And then, obviously, we had substantive discussion. And then I met them in Davos, which you may know. And then I met eventually their CEO. And then I say, what's your vision? He said, we want to build the greenest cars and the greenest battery. And I said, well, why don't we talk? And from one thing to the other, they invited me in Germany, and then we sealed the deal. So there's two stories in that. Never be shy to make a cold call, and always read your briefing books. And that's a good. Listen, I think they're telling me we need to go. Jill, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for making this stop at the university and sharing your time and insight with us. Please join me in thanking Minister Champagne.
Thank you very much. Thanks you.